Brian Lindenberg is a senior partner at consulting firm Mercer in Calgary. He spoke with us about balancing the cost and value of employee benefits. How can employers go about balancing the cost of benefits with their value to employees?
Well, it's a delicate balancing act in terms of, if you look at it from an employer perspective, they've got this new imperative that they need to manage their costs, in part because of the economic realities. But on the flip side, the attraction and retention imperative hasn't gone away. So in terms of the need to attract and retain employees, that still is very much on the radar screen for most employers. So you've got this delicate balance act in terms of how I manage costs, and yet not do anything today that's going to impact upon my benefit promise to employees, if you will. I think a good starting point is to really understand what your drivers of cost are. So in terms of what is driving your planned costs, and occasionally what your tolerance is for cost increases in the future, and also how your benefit program helps to support the organizational business objectives, if you will, or business strategy. So you've got to sort of determine a bit of a roadmap in terms of where you're going.
What are the main elements employers need to consider when determining the effectiveness of their benefits plan?
Well, obviously there's a lot of different terminology or how you define effectiveness is pretty key. I think the obvious one is cost effectiveness in terms of what is your cost, your benefit plan cost, but perhaps more importantly, what is the rate of escalation of that cost? And so effectiveness to you may be having a low cost or a low rate of escalation. So I think that's an important measure, if you will, of effectiveness. I think another measure of effectiveness is employee satisfaction in terms of how satisfied employees are, whether you get complaints about the program, do you do formal surveying on the plan in terms of how employees are satisfied, or even doing things like exit interviews in terms of are they leaving in part due to the benefit program. So employee satisfaction, I think, is key. I think another measure of effectiveness is, do you hear complaints about the actual administration of the program? Do you have problems with claims being paid on a timely basis? Are they being paid on an accurate basis? So the whole administration is another, I think, a measure of effectiveness from a benefit plan perspective. Ironically, I think in some respects utilization is also a measure of effectiveness, in that utilization intuitively means higher costs, but the converse is also true. If you have a plan that isn't being utilized, well, chances are employees either don't understand it or it's a poorly designed plan. So I think you can also measure effectiveness in terms of utilization. I think the final measure of effectiveness is probably competitiveness in terms of how your plan is benchmarked relative to your competitors, assuming that's important to you. Again, I think that's an important measure of effectiveness from a plan perspective.
What do employers need to make sure they include in their benefits plan in order to stay competitive in the future?
I think you need to embrace flexibility within your plan. Just if you look at the workforce dynamics becoming increasingly diverse. And so I think flexibility works from a plan perspective and an employee satisfaction perspective. So I do think you need to embrace employee or some element of flexibility within benefit plan design. So that would be the first thing I'd want to embed in it. You can't ignore cost management. It is real. It is here today. And again, you need to think in terms of how my plan is going to, what are my cost drivers today, how those costs are going to change over time, and how am I going to manage those costs over time. And so again, I think you need to sort of consider how you're going to manage those costs over time. I think you need to embed things such as how you're going to communicate your programs in terms of, I think, again, I mentioned earlier, utilization is a double-edged sword, but if your employees don't understand the plan, it's not a very good plan. And so I think you need to think in terms of how you're going to communicate your program going forward. And again, I think that's a very, very big aspect of the plan. You can have the best plan design, but if no one understands it, then it's not a very good plan.